We are recording the interview of Bruce Dodds. This interview is being conducted by Ericka Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Holiday Inn at 200 Presidential Drive in Dayton, Ohio. It is 1:30 p.m. on June 6, 2019. Hi.
Hello.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in Clay Center, Kansas, 1950, September 3rd.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My dad, Willard Eugene Dodds, and mother is Bertha Ladine Dodds, and he was a farmer and she was a homemaker.
Did you have any siblings?
I have an older sister that's 2 years older, younger sister that's 2 years younger, and then a younger brother that's 3 years younger.
Did any of them join the service?
No.
Just you?
Yes.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
When I graduated from high school, my first job was to work in a parts store at the car, and they paid $1.65 an hour, and I had the opportunity to go to work at a rock quarry for $2.25 an hour. So that job included go to the bottom of the hill where the rock was being crushed, load it up in a truck, go to the top of the hill and dump it in the pile.
Was that good money back then?
$2.25, I was on my way to being rich.
Woohoo! Okay. So if you were gonna be rich soon, what made you join the military?
In the Kansas in December, it gets very cold and nasty. The rock quarry does not operate very well in cold weather. The recruiter, who I had seen on my senior day to go visit people, called up and said that they had a buddy program where you could go into service with your friend and go through basic with a friend. They had an opening in January, and we would go to Texas, and it would be just wonderful. So I decided to go ahead and join the service in 1968. It was the highest draft, so we had the option of you could either volunteer or you could join, enlist. So I decided to go ahead after driving a rock truck, which that was sarcasm about getting rich. Excuse me.
Okay. I believed you. Okay. So what buddy did you join with?
The guy I went to high school with was a year older, and he was about to be drafted, so he needed to get in right away, and that's why he was going. And so we entered Manhattan, Kansas. We got on our bus to go to Kansas City and went to basic training in Lackland Air Force Base. And we were in squadrons, 2 squadrons downstairs in the barracks and 2 squadrons upstairs. He ended up in the squadron upstairs, and I was in the downstairs squadron. And I seen him one other time after we was in basic. Other times we never did see him the rest of the time, basically, to visit with.
Why the Air Force?
I have an older cousin who was a pilot in the Air Force, another older cousin who was a jet engine mechanic in the Air Force. And because of that, I knew that the Air Force was a lot easier to get through. Basic was 6 weeks. They had options. You kind of had a chance to know where you was going. If you was drafted, you was going to be on the ground in the Army with a gun in your hand in South Vietnam. So the Air Force seemed like that easiest way to stay alive.
Okay. Okay. Do you remember anything specific about basic?
The previously in the being raised on a farm, you never had to worry about saluting. You know, your friends are your friends, and they would help you. And the first thing in the military, they found out you had no friends. The training instructor was not your friend, and he was not there to help you. And if you did not follow the rules, you got in trouble. And we're not going to mention any of that. But the thing was to survive for your 6 weeks, get out and go on to do whatever you was going to do. We had the exercise, I called it the playground, where you got to go out and run and jump over stuff and climb walls. It was like a giant playground to me. And I thought that was fun, and we ought to do that more often instead of marching.
Okay. So you enjoyed that, didn't care for marching. PT was pretty simple and easy. Okay. You went on to graduate course.
Basic.
What happened after basic?
You had to wait for your assignment. When you had the options on the assignment, they gave you 3 choices on this long list of things that you were qualified for from your test. And the first, you could only choose one option that had asterisk beside it, and then you had 2 other options. And of course, I've never heard of any of these terms before. And so I put down my first option with asterisk. The second option, I didn't know what it was. But my third option was a weapons mechanic, because I'd worked on cars and I liked guns. Didn't have a clue what a weapons mechanic was. And that's what I got assigned.
Well, tell us what a weapons mechanic does.
So we went to, basically, I call it tech school, training school at Lowry Air Force Base in Colorado. What we did was either load bombs on planes. The release system was electronic. So because I had qualified in electronic field, that included one of my options in electronic field. Also the guns on a weapons mechanic were fired electronically. So that's why the weapons mechanic was in the electronic field. So my training at the tech school was basic electronics, and then some basic of putting a bomb on a plane. But it was pretty basic in the tech school because you didn't know what plane you would eventually work on. So it was just basic information.
How long was tech school?
It was a 12-week, I believe, tech school. I believe it was 12 weeks.
Did you get more liberties in tech school than basic?
We were stationed at Denver, Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, and because the schooling was so many hours a day, they also had, if it wasn't in schooling, you would either do training or marching or something like that. And in the morning when we form up, they would ask for volunteers to go do basic cleaning at one of the office buildings. And so instead of marching, I was one that would always volunteer to go do cleaning. And I'd usually end up cleaning vacuuming or buffing the floor for an hour. And then I had the rest of the morning off before training school. So I was not into marching.
We see. Okay, so I'm just going to ask this short question. Did you find yourself marching much once you were full duty?
Never. We never marched again. The second base we went to was McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay, hold on. I got a few more questions before we get there. How did you adapt to military life, basic and tech school?
Because I'd never been around anybody that hollered at me. I've never saluted in my life. If I saw an officer, I would cross the street, and from a distance, so I would not have to salute. And the marching, I thought, was a waste of time. My squadron, because we went by the taller person was in the front, I was next to the second, and my job as we marched down the street was to be what we called road stop, where you go out and stop any traffic that was approaching as the troop went by, the group went by. And anyhow, it was a whole new experience to me. I had been in the high school band, and I had learned how to march in the band and keep step. And when you found the kid that had never marched in his life, and the tallest guy was 6'6", and the guy at the back was 5 foot tall, he would always be out of step, the guy in the back. So we'd all get in trouble because the guy in the back was bouncing. So I did not adapt well to military life.
I'm sorry to hear that. Did that ever change, or you just...
No.
Okay.
The attitude in most of the people that I was with, is the reason they were in the Air Force was they were going to end up being drafted, and they didn't want to be in the Air Force. There were some who had gone to college, and didn't make it. But as a general rule, we all had a negative attitude. We was not there by choice.
Okay. So did you like any of so you were from Kansas, you'd now been to Texas, you'd been to Denver. What time of year was it when you went to Denver?
It was in January. No, it was in March.
Okay.
It was cold then, and the barracks we were put in was left over from World War II, and it didn't have any insulation. The heating system was bad. Because we were just out of basic, we had basic clothes, but nothing that was keep us warm, and so it would get cold, and then we would have to keep our barracks spit shined. We actually used wax on the floor on our hands and knees, and we would not be able to walk down the center line of our barracks. You had to go to the outside wall with your socks on because you did not want to mess up that barracks. And when we finally got in tech school, it was a little easier. We had some fire drills where in the middle of the night they'd bang the trash cans, and we'd all have to run out the door with whatever we had on, which in the middle of the night we didn't have that much on. But and they did things to irritate us to see if we could put up with it. And it was just a military way of life. I did not adapt well. But we developed friends, and everybody else was in the same situation, so it was just another day.
Okay. You arrive at your next duty station?
At Air Force Base in Wichita, Kansas.
So you're home, almost home.
And we had options. You could fill out a sheet of paper on what base you would like to go to. And so I put Wichita because it was within 150 miles of home. And so I lucked out and got that. So then I could go home about every second or third weekend. Our military pay at that time, even though gas price was 27 cents, I didn't have enough money to drive home and back and still have any money. But so I had the options of going home, and I didn't use any leave time. And the airplane we flew then was a F-105 aircraft known as the lead sled, because if the engine quit, it went straight down into the ground. And Thanksgiving, we had to go to California to a bombing range where they actually used live bombs instead of just the practice bombs. So I got to go to George Air Force Base in California's out in the desert. And so we were there for a couple of weeks. So I got to go to George Air Force Base, and while we were there, because it's Thanksgiving, I had time off, and I went out. The days you could hitchhike, stand outside the Air Force Base, and somebody pick you up. And I think it was San Bernardino. I got to hitchhike to San Bernardino, and a guy there was in the military, explained how you got around. And so he was kind of my training, and when we came back, I found out whoever got to the entry ramp on the freeway got to get on the first ride that stopped. Well, I didn't know that, so when you show up at 11:30 at night, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning when they stopped to pick. There was 3 of us got in with a man, and he was going to Las Vegas. And he said he was coming back the next morning, or next day was Sunday. He was coming back at 4 o'clock Sunday, so he could drop us by the Air Force Base on the way up or on the way back. And the 3 of us never knew each other, and so we said, well, we'd all like to go to Las Vegas. I was 18 at the time, and of course Las Vegas had rules that not all 18-year-olds couldn't go into every place. But, so we got there Sunday morning about sunup, and got to walk around Las Vegas in 1969, and 4 o'clock I was on the way back. So that was the only time I've ever been to Las Vegas, but it was another learning experience. So basically, was there at Wichita for basically a year before I got the orders to go overseas.
I'm from San Bernardino.
Oh my.
Yes, I spent about half my life there.
Yeah, so you know what it's like there.
I do, and I've been to Vegas a few times. Even as a kid, we would pop on over because it's about 4 hours.
Yeah.
drive.
Sunday afternoon drive.
Yeah, so good for you.
Well, maybe.
Well, I've as a kid had to stand outside and wait for mommy. Just go run in here for a second.
Yeah.
But it was a lot different time.
For sure.
Time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm happy you had that experience at least. Okay, so you spent your year close to home, but you didn't get to go home very much.
Well, every second or third weekend.
Okay.
That's good.
Considering.
A lot of people don't.
True. And then you got called to go overseas. So this had to be about 1969. All right, so that's
70.
Oh, 1970.
I went in 1969, so I was there tech school a year at McConnell, so it was middle of 1970.
Okay.
I went overseas.
All right. How do your parents feel about that?
It was one of those, it was just part of life. You didn't question it. They didn't say anything about it. You know, when I left, my mother took me to the bus station at the nearest town was 40 miles away to go to Kansas City to get on the plane. My sister was with us, and it was just one of those, it just was going to happen. And I do remember going down the road from our farm thinking it could be the last time I'd seen it, which was a different feeling I never had before. When we got to the bus station, our buddies was there that I was going to service with, and they said goodbye, and we just got on the old Greyhound bus and away we went. So we never discussed it with Mom and Dad at all. So.
How did you keep in contact with them when you were overseas?
We'd write letters, and then eventually they had these things called cassettes that was really new, and you could actually talk on a cassette and record it and go back and forth. So we did that later.
Do you have any of those?
I have some letters that I wrote to my sister, which was a lot different than the letters I wrote to my mother, and she had saved those letters, so I do have those letters. I don't know that any of the cassettes, a lot of times we use them over and over, so we'd erase them. So basically, the letters and things I sent to my mother was everything's all right, you know, I hate the food, life is miserable, but everything's all right.
But that wasn't necessarily true.
Well, I wrote a different wording, same process, but different wording to my sister, so
Okay.
the older sister.
All right. So you took the Greyhound to your station, and then you took a airplane to your place of duty.
We flew to San Francisco to go overseas. Flew out of San Francisco.
Was that your first time in San Francisco?
Yes.
What'd you think of that?
Well, it was you go into the Air Force Base, and you stayed overnight, and then the plane left the next morning. So I did not tour San Francisco.
Pacific is cold.
Pardon?
The Pacific Ocean is cold.
That's what they say.
Yeah, it's very, very cold up there. All right, so how was that flight?
So when we left San Francisco, we had stewardesses on our plane, and we flew to Hawaii to refuel. And after we left, we got off the plane in Hawaii while I was refueling the plane, and we went down. It was at night. We went down inside the building, and there's a long hallway, and we all walked to the end of the hallway and found out the gate was locked at the end of the hallway. The only way you could get out was the same way you came in, and there was guards there to make sure nobody was going AWOL, because not everybody wanted to go overseas at the time. And so there was a vending machine, so I had a candy bar in Hawaii. That was my big thrill. So and then when we got back on the plane, the people that took care of the water and peanuts or whatever it was men, and they really, it was all military. It was all a military flight. So they really didn't care about being nice to us. So it was just another day in the Air Force.
Where'd you land?
So we went to Bangkok, that's in Thailand, and that's the main city, capital of Thailand. And when we got there, the barracks were full. We call them transient barracks, and so we got to stay in a hotel downtown.
Oh, you Air Force.
So anyhow, they said we could select, you know, people that if we wanted to have roommates. Well, you know, none of us knew each other, so we just got roommates. And then the next day we would get on the airplane that would take us to our individual bases. There was, I don't know, at least 5 or 6 different military bases in Thailand. So then we flew to the new base and got assigned there.
Okay. You land, what happens?
The let's see, we had, you know, eventually get assigned a room, and it ended up, the one guy, his name is Barry Rowland, and he's the one that helped organize this reunion. And he was from Kansas also. And when we got to this base, same deal, they said, you know, if you know somebody you want to be a roommate with, you know, you can choose to be a roommate with them. And so because I knew Barry, and he talked to the other guy on the plane, and so there was, I think, 3 of us. And they called them hooches that we stayed in Thailand. They were a one-story building built off the ground about 4 feet. And they had screened-in walls, and then the bottom half was a slanted wood, so airflow would go through them with just a roof. And then the latrine was at a separate building, you know. So there was a whole bunch of hooches in a row with a latrine for all of us. And so we first got there, you know, we were in the transient, you know, part of it. So eventually we got assigned our duty stations, which he went into the gun shop and I went into the bomb loading shop. So therefore he went to a different hooch and I went to a different hooch. So basically didn't see much of him after that. So.
Interesting. When I went to Iraq, we called them hooches too.
Yeah, but they were a little different.
They were a little different, but they were off the ground. I can say that. They were off the ground.
They probably didn't have screens for the
Oh,
windows.
God, no.
Yeah.
Those sand camel spiders would have eaten us alive. Anyway, they will try. Not the point. It's about you. Okay. So you didn't see Mr. Rowland much anymore.
Correct.
But you did make a friend, and you still talk to him today.
You betcha.
Awesome. Okay. Tell me about an average day.
So we were trained first because we had never worked on this particular plane, and to load a bomb on a plane.
Did you say what plane?
Is an A1 aircraft. There's
Okay.
different models of aircraft, but they were a propeller-driven plane built in World War II and used in Korea. So they were antiques.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And we have pictures of them. I'm going to show up. Our squadron was the 456th Munitions Maintenance Squadron.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one's a picture. The base was called Nakhon Phanom Royal Thai Air Force Base in Thailand. And there's a little star. It's up in the corner. And the reason that this base was there was it's close to Laos, and they could fly across Laos and get to Vietnam quickly. There's a short space if you look at the map to get there, and that's the purpose of the base being there. These airplanes did not have a long flight range. The A1 was known for flying close to the ground and support of Army on the ground. So we learned how to load these bombs, and they would fly missions, and the standard, you know, they would tell us what bombs went on planes, and we would go out there and actually put them on the plane, and then they go to the end of the runway. We had safety tags or something, so the bomb wasn't armed until, you know, the plane actually took off. And then we learned to do that, and I was in the bomb loading part. The guns were a separate division, you know, people that repaired guns, and the people that worked on the release mechanism for the bombs were separate. And so basically every day you get up, go to work, and it was hot and miserable, and nobody cared. So we all complained that we did our job, and there was days sometimes we had 5 days on, 1 day off, so we did have time off to go downtown and look at the sights, and do different things, or stay on the base and do things. So after about 3 months, we ended up, my crew number was 13, and after about 3 months, we ended up getting on a plane and going to Vietnam. And I asked the member of my crew, I said, why did they pick our group to go to, our crew to go to Vietnam? Our crew number was 13, but I didn't believe in the lucky numbers. So I wanted to know why they picked us. And he said our crew chief, who was the leader, wanted to go to Vietnam so he could get $65 a month combat pay. So we left a perfectly good place to go to Da Nang, Vietnam, so he could have $65 a month. Of course, we all got $65 a month combat pay added to our income. So we ended up in Vietnam, and we were there for basically 3.5 months. The squadron was there to support downed pilots. They had what was called smoke bombs, and this plane would fly close air support. I've seen bamboo on the wings of these planes when they came back, so you could tell they was flying close to the ground. But the smoke bombs would be put, if a pilot was located, they would put the smoke bombs down, cover the area with smoke, and the Jolly Green Giant helicopters would come in and rescue the pilot. So that was the main reason for the A1s in Da Nang.
So when you, okay, so a pilot had lost a plane or
ejected and was on the ground.
All right.
And so because the pilots that were there flying the A1s got bored and they wanted something to do, they asked if they could fly bombing missions.
Fly what kind of missions?
Bombing missions,
okay.
You know, because they were just sitting there waiting. And so they decided that as long as they had some airplanes in standby with the smoke bombs on them, the other planes could fly bombing missions. And so after, I imagine it was 2 or 3 months of being there, they sent a crew to inspect why we were flying so many bombing missions with 10 or 12 planes compared to the 30 planes that were back in Thailand. We were flying more missions with 10 planes than they were flying with 30 back there. But you see, they was right there close to the war. And the pilots were very aggressive. so they loved to fly bombing missions. And they sent inspectors. The military has a very good way of, if something's going wrong or right, they're going to send an inspector to see. And a particular day that we were being inspected on how we were loading these bombs according to the book, there was the siren went off, a pilot was shot down. So the airplane that had bombs on it had to have the bombs downloaded, taken off, and then the smoke bombs uploaded. And my crew chief said, we don't care about doing this by the book. We're going to get this done in a hurry and get those airplanes in the air. And our inspector, that I happened to have one standing behind me, and I'm driving this little forklift thing on 4 wheels, and he's standing there with his little checklist. He's going to follow me and write down what I did wrong. And I almost ran over him. And so he disappeared. And so we got our work done, we got the planes off, and we looked around, and the inspectors had folded up their little books and went home. So they knew exactly how we were getting our work done, and they was not going to do anything to report against us while we were rescuing a pilot. So there was no more said about that. But they soon decided to close down that operation of bombing runs, and we were sent back to Thailand and KP again. And they just left 2 airplanes there on standby all the time with the bombs loaded on them, so they were ready to go at any minute with the smoke bombs. But later, about a month and a half later, our crew chief again volunteered us for 60 days TDY, temporary duty, so we could get that another $65 a month combat pay. So we went back to Da Nang for another 60 days. So I bounced back and forth, you know, but we served the first year, and I ended up back in Thailand, you know, to get my first year's duty.
Why was the officer so gung-ho about the $65? Did he have a bunch of kids?
No, he's married, yes. He's married, and he wanted the money because, you know, basically he had nothing else to do other than sit in the barracks at night. So, you know, So he wasn't interested in going downtown, going sightseeing. But
Well, did you enjoy the sightseeing?
oh yes, yes, we had lots. I bought a movie camera. It's called Super 8 Movies, reel-to-reel camera, and we would rent bicycles. The main thing in Thailand was the Buddhism religion had their temples. Thai people were all very poor, lived basic lives, and the temples was the only thing that was worth tourism, I guess. Anyhow, so yes, we did. Several of us would go rent a bicycle and go out riding the country, and think about how stupid that was that we were young.
Do you still keep up with any of those guys?
No, and that's a reason I wanted to come to this reunion, and to find out, other people. Make a roundabout story. I went out after Thailand. I came back to the United States and stationed at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. And when I was down there, sure enough, we made another trip to Thailand for 6 months of TDY. And one of those guys, I kept up with him until he died. So, but other than that, Barry Rowland, I've sent him a Christmas card. He sent me one every year since we got out of service. Today was the first day I met his wife after all these years. But basically, Barry was the only one I've ever stayed in contact, and this other guy that died. So,
Okay, so after the first year in Thailand, did you go on vacation?
we had leave time, yes.
Okay, you went back home?
Yes.
Your parents were happy to see you?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we still have pictures. They had a picnic, potluck picnic at the lake. Pictures of what, and we had both sides, mom's side and dad's side of the family, all there. And of course, I was overwhelmed, haven't seen these people for a year, and it's amazing, the return, and see all these people you can't possibly visit with them all, but they all had a good time. It was a picnic outside of the lake, so it was a good time, yes.
How did the Americans receive you when you got home?
So when I got home, I had leave time, and it was what we call harvest time in Kansas, wheat, and all the clothes I had, I had one or two pairs of good clothes overseas, but we were jungle fatigues all the time, and so we modified jungle fatigues. If you take the shirt and cut the long tail off, and the sleeves off, they were good for wearing in the summertime. And then my jungle fatigues, and I had my old jungle boots, and so when I was home helping during harvest, we went up the grain elevator where you haul the grain to, and I had on the green clothes I've been wearing for 3 years, they're just standard to me. And the one guy at the grain elevator called me Colonel. I says, "Oh my gosh, you can call me any name in the world, but don't ever call me that." I still didn't like officers that very much. You were, I can't say whether you was an officer, right?
Aren't you an officer?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was enlisted, and in the last, we took what we call proficiency tests, and to get promoted, in the old days, you had to have somebody would write your resume or whatever it was called, and if you had somebody that couldn't write well, you didn't get promoted, and so they decided that they went to the proficiency test, and so at the end, I came within 3 points of being upgraded to the next rank, but because there were so many at that time, that branch, work thing, that I got extra pay. I didn't make it into the thing, but I think my last 5 or 6 months I got extra pay for proficiency pay is what they called it. So, but, no, I was at the bottom of the totem pole, and I like to tell everybody that it wasn't the people that were in charge that won that war. It was the workers, and the workers were all the E1s, 2s, and 3s. Were doing the labor.
Absolutely.
And that's still true today, I believe.
It is. It absolutely is. When did you get out of the military?
So I got back from overseas the second time, Thailand, in November, and I found out that if you could get early out, if you was enrolled in college, and so I went to find out about that, and they said, yes, you can get a 2-week early out, and my departure date was January 20th, and then if your departure date was below January 5th, you could get out before Christmas. So when I found out that, I went and applied for that, and they said, well, you need your resume, but you need to accept it at college. So I sent for that piece of paper and never did receive it. So like 2 days before it had to be in, I somehow got a hold of the college, and they got it sent in time. So within, I was at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, so within, I think 2 days of receiving that paper, then I was eligible for that early out. So I got out on the 20th of December, so I was home for Christmas in the year 1972, and then went to college after that, the GI Bill.
What did you think of Florida?
When I first went down there, you take a Kansas boy and take him out to the beach, he just thinks it's wonderful. And then the first time you get out of the water covered with seaweed, you think this isn't that much fun after all. Then we had developed friends down there in Florida. The one guy had been in the service. He had a minivan. It was a 1971 or 2 Chevrolet little van he converted. And we went to Daytona race, Daytona Beach. And another time we went to Mardi Gras, which was another education for the Kansas farm boy. And we developed our friendships and had a good time. And, there was always something to do. The part that you probably don't need to know about is the barracks got full, new people, and 5 of us old guys had to move off base. It was just terrible. 5 of us rented a house together, and because we didn't have wives, we didn't have to worry about keeping it just perfect, and so they decided that would be where we should have our parties. And
of course,
we had our first, it was a fish fry, and we had our first, and we made lemonade, and of course they needed flavor, and so we added flavor to it. And the next morning we looked around inside our house, and we asked, who are those guys, or where'd that guy come from? We didn't know. We had a good party, and I think the second party was eat very well, and then by the time it was ready for a third party, they told us we was going back overseas. So that was not a very happy party. Part of our friends were staying because they were getting out of service, didn't have enough time left in service to stay. So our third party was never as happy, but we enjoyed Florida. We were called old timers by then. At age 22, we were the old guys.
Do you have any other stories that you'd like to share about your time overseas? Or
the thing about overseas is, my job is pretty monotonous. We did the same thing day after day. I was mentioning today that when we were in Vietnam, the commander had called the whole squadron together and explained how we worked as a group in the Air Force. We couldn't fly a plane if it wasn't running, if the hydraulics didn't work, if the engine wouldn't run, if the bomb loaders didn't do their job, if the gun didn't do their job. And he had some photographs that he had taken, I think they was Super 8 film, of the gun actually firing with the tracers. And you can see some of those movies today, and it wasn't until then that you really felt appreciated. Most of the military, you was just another worker going to work, and nobody cared about you. And I think that was the first time in the military when he had us all together and told us how he was working together as a group, and appreciated it. And then the other thing, when we came back from overseas, got out of the military, you basically didn't tell anybody who's in the military. When I went to college, I had my jacket, my field jacket, I don't think these words, and I wore that at first. Well, you see some of the hippies wore field jackets at that time too, but anyhow, to college, you see, I was wearing a field jacket, so, you know, when they looked at me, they could tell whether I was in the service or not. But a lot of people today, even here at the reunion, mentioned they didn't talk about being in the service for years. And several years ago, my cousin has talked about Branson, Missouri, where they have the Veterans Week, and it's in November, the week before November 11th, and that's the first time I really felt welcome home, you know, in that time period. So it's amazing that there are people still healing from that time period. They didn't talk about the Vietnam War and being in the service and what they've done. And there's Iraq veterans are in the same situation. But, I belong to VFW, and they said that we have Iraq veterans, suicide problems. So basically, the story's the same. You know, it's a different year, but we have sympathy for them too. But we hope that they can make it through also.
Okay. You mentioned that you have a wife. When did you meet her?
Well, that's a long story. We shouldn't tell all the details, but when I got back from overseas, I went to school, and she worked in the library at the university, and the library was never where you would find me, but anyhow, that's where we met, and she was married at the time, and so eventually, when we were friends with the group of friends, and then she eventually got divorced, and we got married. So that's enough details.
Okay. Do you feel like you had any issues readjusting to civilian life?
I tell everybody I'm still perfect. And when they ask me how I am, I say I'm good. And people argue with me. They don't think I'm that good after all. But basically the first semester at school, parking for the professors, and it was always empty. They had their individual parking, and I thought, I've been to Vietnam, I can park there too. After the second ticket, they said one more ticket, I wasn't going to be allowed on the university. I decided, well, maybe I'll just not park there anymore. But as my attitude, there's a lot of that. I went in class, I was 22 years old, going to class with kids right out of high school, and I probably didn't have a perfect attitude in school, but it was a fun life going to college. College is fun if you know how to do it. All you got to do is show up, fill out your paper, and you're done. And then there was eventually a time where you had to make this decision on a major. Anyhow, it was one of those. I graduated. I got a degree in dirt.
In dirt?
Dirt.
Okay.
Dirt. Yeah. They call it agronomy. Where you grow plants. And I just tell them it's dirt. And people didn't know you could get a degree in dirt. But anyhow, and a lot of people don't appreciate the fact that everything they eat today is grown someplace.
Mm-hmm.
So the benefit, I did get a degree, and when they pick on me, I tell them I have a degree, they do not believe me still.
Okay. Do you use your degree now, or?
Well, I was a farmer all my, yeah, I went back to farming after I got my degree in agriculture, and I was farming all my life. I retired, kind of, more or less.
Did you go back home to Kansas and just keep the family farm? And
I bought my own farm when I got out of college, and farmed my dad's farm where I was raised. And when he passed away, it's 2013, 2014, divided the family farm between the siblings, and I decided that would be a good time to retire. And so we sold my equipment. So I rent out my farm ground so somebody else does the work. I go out there as a hobby to clean up little trees and weeds and fence and do stuff. It's my escape.
I'm very happy that you're here and that you're experiencing time with your fellow veterans and that you're still able to work on and have fun with them. To me, it is such a joy and a pleasure. I know after Iraq, when I came back to school, it was really difficult to sit in a classroom with these 18-year-olds and have them complain that their mommy didn't buy them an iPhone after what I had just seen and witnessed and been through, so that they could complain about it, their mommy not buying them an iPhone. But I had a place like our Veteran Military Center where I could go and be with other vets. So if you do go back to school, now that is an option for you. You can go hang out at the VMC with other vets and chill. Okay. Has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
Oh, definitely. The picture of the Vietnam War, they say the one picture that was shown the most was a napalm bomb, fire in the background with this little girl running naked. And because I knew I loaded a lot of napalm bombs, you know, it might not have been the one I loaded, but the idea is the same. That the whole idea of Vietnam, when we've done the research and seen how the background of Vietnam, it was wrong. It was a waste of time, waste of money, waste of lives. Iraq is the same thing when it happened. I was upset that the World War II veterans didn't stand up and say Vietnam is a waste of time and money. And here I am, a Vietnam War veteran, and I did not protest the Iraq War because I felt it was no good. I would not be able to do anything about it. Helpless, I guess, to stop the Iraq War, because I felt it would be the same thing. Saddam Hussein, you know, I felt we went in there, cleaned up the mess, get out of there, leave it alone. So now I stay out of politics. I try not to watch the news. It's getting worse. And the politics. And anyhow, yes, my attitude of war is, and we were just discussing today about the drones, you know, how many lives would be saved if we didn't have people, you know, actually fighting the battle. And I don't know the answer to the question about how to fix it, but anyhow, I know that if we don't have our own United States protected, you know, by someone, we will be in severe problems. So I do appreciate the veterans that have served.
Me too. I appreciate the ones that came before me. Do you feel like there is anything that we haven't discussed or should be added to this interview?
Yes, just the other day somebody mentioned that kid needs to go in the service. And every now and then you meet somebody that needs structure in their life, get away from their parents, and learn to live on their own and make their own decisions. I was turned 18 in September. I joined the service, you know, in January. So I was 4 months after I turned 18. I was in the service, and I do believe that I grew up. It did affect me in different ways, but there is so many people in the world today don't appreciate what they have. So I would like to say that it would not have to be service in the military, but to get young people to go out and do something for their country.
That kind of leads into my next question, which would be, what message would you like to leave for future generations who will view and hear this interview?
Today they're talking about Normandy and all the things, and if you read the history of World War II and Normandy landing and all the things that went wrong, you know, you can either complain about it you can understand it, you move on, and you can remember and learn from it. I would say for future generations, you know, to pay attention to what's going on in the world today and do what you can to improve it.
Okay. That concludes our interview with Bruce Dodds. Thank you for your time today and for your military service.